Hey everyone, I'm Taylor Breland. This will be my project presentation for MTSU's Lean Project Management class. And my project this semester was the PMP Study Group Plan. My presentation outline, most of it is covering some exercises from the semester. I'll also share some other project deliverables as well as key takeaways. But first, I just wanted to start with a couple of notes or disclaimers. I will flip back and forth between this PowerPoint and a couple of other programs. I will also, again, focus on exercises from this course since my project is a plan and a lot of these exercises are planning tools. They became part of my project. And lastly, this may be a little dry since my project isn't a trip or a DIY home project. It may not be as fun, but I'll try to make this as interesting as I can. So first, I wanted to take a look at the project charter. Not to spend too much time here, but a little bit of background on my project. So I'm a project manager with the state of Tennessee. We have an affinity group called Project Management User Group, or PMUG, and I'm the education chair for PMUG for 2021. So essentially that just means I am in charge of connecting project managers with learning and training opportunities, but a huge focus of mine is on the project management professionals, or PMP, exam preparation. So the PMP certification, if you pass the test, is a worldwide recognized certification. It is the end-all be-all certification for professional project managers. So I wanted to create a study group as the education chair that would help people prepare to take the exam. So, but I needed a plan before I could do that. So that's where this project came from. One thing I will note here, though, in my problem statement, when I initially submitted this, Dr. Bullington pointed out that this first paragraph, that's all I submitted, only focused on the execution phase of the study group itself. So I added a second paragraph here that basically says, gives the reason like I need a plan before I can actually do the thing. So anyway, that's a change there that I think helped clarify. And that's also kind of mentioned here in my in scope versus out of scope. In scope includes some of these deliverables like coming up with a schedule plan, content plan, some welcome communications, things like that. Another thing I'll mention is it's kind of hard to create KPIs for a plan. It's hard to gauge the success of that. But speaking of success, let me just say, so keep in mind throughout the rest of this presentation, my project was essentially canceled, or at least it experienced a major delay. When I was creating this plan, I learned that another external PMP study group was created, and many of my potential participants were already participating in this one. So it really nullified the need for my study group. But I have chosen to instead help connect people with that existing study group. And then later in the fall, when that one has ended, I may do another 6 to 8 week kind of crash exam prep course for folks who couldn't participate now. So it's not a total loss. I'll speak more on that later, but just keep in mind all of the dates that you're going to see in this presentation are based on my original plan, which was to start the study group this month in April. And as you can see here on my milestones, I originally set these dates, but the good news is I can just transpose these to other dates in the future. So speaking of dates, let's just go to my Gantt chart and my project schedule. I did this using a program called Microsoft Office. It is a little cumbersome, but it is a powerful tool. You can see I entered in all of my tasks, nested them under each other, put in my predecessors, and it's a pretty long schedule. But by entering that, it automatically creates the Gantt chart for me. I don't like Gantt charts. I think I've made that pretty clear in my discussion responses. They're just not beneficial for me. They're confusing to look at. I do see how they would be better used on a more large scale project, but for mine, I'm not a huge fan. I did want to also look at my WBS. This was interesting because I've always done a WBS in a diagram format where you see the very hierarchical boxes that are connected to each other. I really like this format of doing it kind of as a bulleted list. I still think you get the benefit of seeing the hierarchies, but you can add, it's just not as tedious as doing a diagram. I do really think it's important to have a long granular WBS if you can, because these are really powerful in creating what we call bottom-up estimates. So basically, we're taking all of our lowest level tasks and estimating on those, which then give us estimates for the level above that, and so on. So by the time you get to the very top, you've got a really solid estimate. And it's an incredibly powerful tool if you fill it out right. So I would just, to my peers, if you're doing one of these, get as granular as you can. I really liked this version of the WBS. So next, I'm going to pull up my failure mode and effects analysis, or the FMEA, which is really hard for me to say for some reason. This reminded me of kind of a simpler model, which is called the probability and impact matrix. All you're doing there is assigning a numerical score to the probability of a risk, the impact it would have. You multiply those and you get a risk score. So we kind of did that here. But what I really liked about this exercise is that it took into account these recommended actions or mitigations you can take, which then lowered the score. Ironically, this very first one was the thing that nullified the need for my project, and that was that the external study group was created. So I also highlighted this one too because it was also another high scoring one. This is just saying if I get no responses on the survey that I send out in a few months, that's just showing me that no one's interested, and so therefore that would nullify the need for my PMP study group. So I had lots of different examples here. I like this exercise a lot because of the recommended action section. So we'll just jump back into my presentation real quick. We've talked about the Gantt, the WBS, the FMEA, and now this is my cause and effect, or CED diagram, also called a fishbone because it looks like fish bones. I don't have a lot to say about this one, except that I really use the deliverables and my milestones from my charter to drive this. I think one thing people have probably taken away from this is that charters are so important. They drive everything. So I like this visual. Also, just a note for people in the future, if you need templates like this, I use a tool called draw.io, and that's what you put in your web browser. It's a free tool. It's pretty user-friendly. They have templates for this diagram specifically, as well as WBS, Kanban boards, even interior design diagrams. So it's a really cool tool. Speaking of Kanban, this is what my Kanban board would have looked like about a month ago before I learned about the external study group. So when I thought my project was still on track. The yellow are things for this class. The blue are things relevant to my study group. One thing I do like about this version is this doing column, because it forced me to only look at one, or in this case, 3 items at a time, and help me really focus. This is what it looked like after I learned about the study group. And my project was really delayed. It created these red or arrowed tasks here that didn't exist before. Things got moved around. Things that were done went back to do, etc. So it really changed. And then this is what I wanted my Kanban board to look like by the end of the semester. There are still things to do and in progress because, well, I wasn't able to conduct my study group like I had planned to at least start doing by this time. So I say I'm pretty close, though. I've completed most of the items for this course here in yellow, or all of them actually. I've got my schedule plan. I've got my survey, which I'll show in a moment. So I do have some things completed, and that's great. And I wanted to show this example of a Kanban board in the wild. At work, I use what's called Microsoft Team Foundation Server, or TFS. So this is a requirement or a big task that we needed to do. You can see the different columns: to do, in progress, and done. And because all these child tasks are complete, we know that the requirement is done. So that's kind of an example of how maybe it could be used outside of this course. My other major project deliverables, again, my study group survey. This is the survey that I wanted to create. A lot of thought should go into a survey. You don't want to overwhelm people, but you want to capture important information. So this is just a screenshot of the beginning of the survey that I created in Microsoft Forms. I obviously have not distributed this yet, but I will be able to when I'm ready. And it's just collecting information about potential participants in my study group and how they best learn. I also created this Q&A document. This is kind of my mother of all documents when it comes to this plan, because it includes what is the study group, when will we meet, when will it start, and I've highlighted my start date there to remind me I need to update that because that's no longer my start date. And what's covered in each session. I didn't share the full document here because it's kind of lengthy, but the other sections are more about materials, resources specifically that I recommend that our group uses, who our mentors may be to attend the sessions, that kind of thing. And this is just a slide that I'm going to be sharing on Wednesday, April 21st, I believe. For PMUG, we have a monthly meeting where all of our members come and we make announcements and we have presentations. So as education chair, I'll need to give some information here. So as part of kind of my remediation for this, because my project was kind of canceled or delayed, was to connect people with the existing study group. So I got permission from that other study group to share, when and where they meet and how they're studying. And I've included my contact info here so that I can forward them the calendar invitations for those study groups. So even though it's not my study group, I can still connect them to a study group. And I did make note here that I may still have one later on. So anyway, this is kind of my, what I'm doing. Instead of announcing my own study group, I'm announcing someone else's. And I hope people benefit from that. So lastly, my key takeaways, closing remarks. On the tools themselves, I'm familiar with most of them because of work, but I really like the FMEA. I do plan on using that in future projects. I may even, recommend that to some of my coworkers. Like I said before, Gantt charts are not my favorite, but I do see how they could be beneficial for larger scale projects and one with multiple resources. This is important for me to remain humble. If your project isn't needed anymore, don't spend any more time on it. You have to try not to take it personally, because I know a lot of us spend a lot of time and effort on our projects, and it's hard to let go sometimes, but I had to in this case. Lessons learned can always be pulled from a canceled project and applied to future ones. If nothing else, you've probably learned some valuable lessons, and that's important. Another one here, a project doesn't need to be completed to be successful. And it ties into this last bullet here. If I'm able to achieve the same goals, even if I have to approach my project in a different way, it can still be considered successful. And in this case, that means waiting to execute my study plan if it's needed later on. And in the meantime, just connecting folks with a study group that's already out there. So honestly, I think my project was a success in that regard. So anyway, that's kind of a recap of my project for the semester. I really look forward to seeing all of my peers' more exciting projects and to see how those went. So anyway, thank you very much.